Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. For those of you who still know what time of day it is, if you've been up through the night, I don't know. And it's lovely to have you here. Hi, John.
Heidi, hi. How you going? Oh,
Good, thanks.
Hi,
Lovely to
what a
see you.
crowd. So exciting
I
and
know,
familiar face.
surprised. I know, surprised and delighted. Wow. Shall we begin?
Yes, let me share the slides. Here we go.
And in presenter view, if you can do that.
Yeah, sorry, letting people in still. There we go.
Yeah. So hello and welcome everybody to our session to advise or not to advise. That is the question. As coaches, supervisors, consultants, SF practitioners, we have wisdom to share. Or do we? And that is what this session is about today. So we're going to explore that topic. And we're curious to hear from you in the chat, if you would like to do that. Share some good advice you've received recently. So perhaps you've had some good advice that someone has shared with you. What is it? And yeah, we'd be really keen to hear that. So put it in the chat. If your chat's not working, feel free to speak up, but we'd love to hear what's some good advice you've had. So I had some good advice. I mentioned that I'm on a retreat, and my colleague Carola said to me, Janine, she said, you know, if you have no expectations, that leads to happiness. And I thought that was good advice. Abby, what about you? What good advice have you had recently?
Oh, some very good advice. So my computer stopped working mid-update, breaking Zoom last night. And at about 11 o'clock, my husband said, go to bed. We'll have time to look at it in the morning. And we did need lots of time this morning, but it was a really good idea to give up and go to bed.
And living proof that it worked because you're here and smiling today. So, what good advice have you had recently? It could just be a line or a phrase, or unmute yourself and share that with us. What good advice? Ask a lawyer. I love that. Those fonts of wisdom, tax advice. It's that time of year, actually. Um, we are SF practitioners. We should be like satellites. Oh, I would like to know more about that advice. Oh, I love that. This too shall pass. Really very nice piece of advice. Listen without acting on the information. Thank you, Michael. We are a wise group that are gathering here together, and we obviously have wise colleagues, friends, and professionals around us. Two ears, one mouth, use them in proportion. Oh, hi, Andrew. Avoid the tea. Savina, I really want to know about the tea now. You should get married. And how's that working for you, Jenny? That was tax advice. Good advice that is working well. We have a thread. Thank you for sharing that. So thank you. And do feel free to share the wisdom of the group and what advice you have been given. Read Frederick Backman. Thank you, Susanna. We shall add that
Oh,
to the list.
I'll chime in on that one.
You agree. How fab. Okay. Well, thank you very much for sharing your advice, which is the thread and theme of our conversation today. Notice the small things. Thanks, Deborah. Really lovely. So, welcome to you all. And just a little bit about us, Abby, and what brings this session to light as well.
thank you. I'm Abby. I'm a solution-focused coach, and a therapist, mostly working in a high school, but with some private clients too, and a supervisor. And this workshop is really Janine's baby. But I was so intrigued when she came to me with the idea, because I spent a lot of time in mental health spaces, and my initial training was integrative. So I've done a lot of playing with when to advise, when not to advise, how to time my advice. It's been an ongoing experiment. So I thought it was an intriguing subject for us to be talking about.
And I'm Janine, and I'm a SF practitioner, coach, trainer, and so on. And we train a lot of people in solutions focus, managers, leaders, coaches, and also operating as a supervisor. And there's often tension between what we know and do we share it, and is there a place for that? And I was actually struck because I was running a session at the Seoul conference last year, and I just threw that question in just as a filler, really, because we had a bit of space. And I started to have this discussion about, do we share advice or not? And if so, how? And it just seemed to start the conversation, and it seemed one that's topical and useful. So hence this session came to light to continue that conversation. And that's what we're going to do. We're actually going to have a conversation today about that. We're going to reflect on some of the things we do and some of our assumptions around knowledge sharing, and predominantly in coaching and supervision, but whichever context within which you're working. Explore when it may or may not be useful to share advice. So there's an assumption there that perhaps there are times that we do that. And then practice approaches to offering input in ways that keep agency with the other person. So we are going to do an activity as well. This will be an interactive session where you get the opportunity to try some things out. And to kick us off, we have a question for you. This is for your reflection, and then you're going to get an opportunity to discuss it. So on a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is you're ready at any time at the slightest prompt to share your know-how and expertise. And that should say that that's 2 10s, but you get the idea. Let me do that again. On a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is you're ready to share your expertise at any time, and 0 is your mouth is sealed. That'll work for now. Where are you on that scale, and why? And we're going to invite you to have that discussion with your colleagues in a breakout room. You'll have about 5 minutes. I've put it in the chat for you. Can you have that discussion? You don't need to share the number. The number is just for you. And yeah, have a discussion. What places you on that scale? What's your thinking? And how come? Give me a thumbs up if that's all clear to you. Yep. You'll get an invite into your breakout room. You'll be in groups of about 4, if that works. Enjoy the conversation.
Yeah.
Look forward to hearing from you in a short while.
Working.
Pardon?
Are people getting invitations? I'm just wondering if my breakouts are working.
Are people going into breakout rooms? Yeah. If not, I can do that. So yeah, I think they are. Yeah, people are now moving. And I can assign Kai to room 7.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, there's only a couple in room 8. Anyone not moved in? Do you want to pause the recording?
This meeting is being recorded.
And turn them off, down. We don't want the slides. Can you take that down, Abby? That's it. Just turn them, take them, stop sharing. Welcome back from your discussions. We're keen to hear some of your reflections and thoughts. You can share your numbers if you'd like. What came out from your discussions? Who would like to kick us off? Were they useful? Were they interesting? Were there any insights?
I'm very happy to share. So I was in a room with Sue and Akash, and we all kind of agreed it depends. That's it's appreciated is the kind of cheats answer, but we're all happy to share technical information, and if somebody's needing something which we know the answer to and it's factual, then yes, we will share it. But we were also, I think, all nervous of offering advice that's based on opinion, because that just creates dependency or, as Sue said, resistance. And so we would steer away from that. Okay, I think I've summarized our conversation, but Sue, anything?
So I'm hearing there's a range there, Andrew, that it's a range between X and between numbers, and that you're giving different reasons and different thinking as to when and how and the difference that might make.
Yes.
What else? What other thoughts came out or do you have on our topic for today and where you placed yourself on that scale from your discussions? Specific examples or thoughts?
I liked in our group, Stefan mentioned that you can ask for permission and sort of you might have advice to give, but just opening up for that option and not maybe throw it in someone's face straight away. I'm paraphrasing grossly now, but I think that's also a nice way of putting it in the sense of not forcing it upon the client either, but to actually offer if that's appropriate.
Yeah, so we might be in a coaching or a supervision context and we're saying, oh, I've got a thought on that. Would you be okay if I shared it? Or here's something. Yeah, what do people think of that? We're still giving, we're still sharing.
I think the key there, Janine, is the advice being asked for. I mean, sometimes people will come and share something with you, and they're giving a problem. You're itching, going, oh, I could really help and offer some guidance or whatever. And when all they want is someone to listen. And that's the time when you think, okay, I could advise, but I won't, because I sense that the person I'm talking to does not want to hear at this particular time advice. They just want someone to listen.
So what does the person want? Yeah, what other thoughts do we have? Because there is that stance that we are there just to invite, ask questions, perhaps reflect back. Yet I'm hearing that some people are comfortable with this idea of sharing advice and wisdom. Jane?
Yeah, I was going to say there's a big difference between advice and sharing information. So I don't think I would ever share what I think somebody should do, because I can't possibly know. But I think working with the ICF, the International Coach Federation, have a very good kind of what is one of their core competencies about. You can share advice, you can share knowledge and information, because one of my colleagues said you can't coach across a knowledge gap. So I guess it's about how I see it is, even if a client asks for, can you tell me something about this? I will always coach first and say, well, what have you thought about already? Using SF ideas, suppose you had the right advice, where would that get you? Or suppose you had the right information, and get as far as the client can, and then say, right, what else, if anything, can I add to that? And then if there's, if they have, most of the time they get to where they need, because sometimes it's like, well, I just wanted reassurance more than anything. They had ideas and they didn't actually need any information from me. But there are times where, like, well, actually, I don't know this. And so I might say, well, would you be willing, would you be interested in me sharing some things that maybe have worked for other clients or know of, and offer it? So it's always in the spirit of offering and then sharing it and then sort of coaching around it, going, well, what resonated, what was useful, how do you take it forward? So I guess I always see that there can be a place for giving information, not advice. But I always work with the client to get as far as they can first and only then offer if they want to.
Yeah. So there's something about, yes, what we're offering. And so that's a nice distinction, information versus advice. And I heard that the ICF competencies have changed slightly to reflect that as well recently too.
Yep.
And there's something there about when we might choose to offer something if we do, because I'm an advocate of perhaps sharing something if it's useful. And if we know the Oscar model, outcome scale, know-how, affirm, action, and review. There's an opportunity perhaps to share know-how once we've heard everything from the client, or is there? Because some people might not want to, which is still this question: do we really need to do it as well? You can't coach across a knowledge gap. Really nice. Thanks, Sue, for capturing that and for the articles shared here as well. Any other thoughts or reflections or questions before we share some thoughts as well from our side?
Got my hand up, shall I?
There you go. Yes, go on.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of thinking this from a kind of an anthropological point of view.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would struggle answering that question just based on the fact that we're not separate. We're always working as a team and we're entangled, and think that we're separate beings even in a macro or a micro situation, in a session or in a process or in a meeting. It confuses us. I mean, both culturally and linguistically, we tend to isolate ourselves, and we talk about what are you doing and what's the other person doing, but what's actually happening is much more entangled than we tend to describe it and try to get how we approach these kind of situations. Like, for instance, how does a handshake become a handshake, or how does a kiss become a kiss? I mean, it's a series of really small invitations to each other. We're constantly adapting and calibrating to what's possible right now in the moment as it unfolds. And I think it's the same when we ask questions and we respond to our client. It's a series of really, really small invitations that we're listening for. So what's useful, what's being made possible. So answering that kind of question, advice, giving information, well, it does, like Andrew was saying, it depends. Or Jane was saying, what are we actually doing here? Is it sharing information? Well, we're doing that all the time. Just by being here, we're sharing information, right? Just by sitting here, I'm communicating something. There's something being said in my tonality, in the way I sit, in the way I speak, in the way I, and the things also being said what I'm not doing is also communication. So it's impossible not to be influencing and sharing information. That's like an impossibility. But it's a question about, I suppose, how do we do that, and how do we train that, and how do we learn to be with each other in a way that's useful? And I think it's a constant calibration. It's a constant and the more we're aware of what's being made possible from the situation that we're in, the better we can calibrate. And I don't know if that's an answer to the question, but I find it really hard to think of a world where I'm separate.
Yeah, and it demonstrates the complexity of this question, and that the binariness of to advise or not to advise is perhaps simplistic. Hence the reason that this conversation continues, because it is contextual and it is complex. And you touched on a really nice point there. How do we train that? Because we can't give a definitive answer. Yes, it's all right. No, it isn't. And that's really what this discussion is highlighting. And so thank you for sharing all your points and for the comments in the chat. Abi, what reflections do you have? And also, what points would you like to share next as well? Hand over to you.
Well, first off, I love that as a reflection of of the complexity of what it is we're doing, and yes, some of the ridiculousness in terms of our agonising about these things, given that we're always building and co-creating together. Let me share the screen, because my way of thinking about this just kind of generated a series of, I suppose, questions that I would reflect on before making a decision. I'll just do the screen share bit first because I can't do two things at once. Okay, and yeah, and these are some of the things that I think I wanted to think about before offering anything. And that's like, why am I doing it? Am I doing it because I feel stuck? Am I doing it because I want to rescue the client? Am I doing it because I'm frightened of their stuckness and like the knowledge hasn't emerged yet in the session? So really figuring out kind of what my intentions are about what it is that I want to offer, whether it feels like information or advice, what's driving that. So being really intentional as far as one can be live in a session. The other thing that I would be considering is who is it that I'm working with, and how do they respond to advice and guidance? You know, are they people who find that really frustrating? Actually, are they looking for listening space and to generate stuff themselves, and actually being given stuff that feels like information or advice creates a kind of pushback in the session? I'm hesitating about the resistance word, but you know, maybe that style of talking isn't in the client's way of cooperating with helpful conversations. I love Jane's reflection about when you might offer what you offer, you know, and would agree that probably the style that I've landed on is coaching as much as I can, as much as I can. And then at the end, if there's still a need and it still seems appropriate, offer what it is that I want to offer. Then it's the what. We've talked a little bit about that. You know, are we offering just a piece of information and maybe it doesn't need overthinking? Or are we offering something a little bit more nuanced than that? I was thinking about kind of mental health strategies. I was taught from a very integrative perspective. And I think some of the strategies that I might offer in a session, that they aren't information. There are other people's opinions about how you might manage a particular issue. So it's a kind of a consideration of what it is that's being offered and where it fits on this kind of information advice spectrum. We're going to talk a bit about how, because Janine had some really interesting ideas about that, and I will pass over to her in the middle in a minute to talk about some of the hows, how you might offer something that you want to offer. But finally, the kind of what now, you know, how do you, after you've offered something, how do you land it in such a way as it is tentative and pragmatic and then passes the expertise back to the client? You know, how does that land with you? What do you think about that? What does it bring up for you? How do you create a space after offering something that allows the client to say, yes, that's helpful to me and I'll take it, or no, I'm just going to leave that in the space between us? So those are the thoughts that came up for me. I'll pass back to Janine.
Yeah, I'm building on the what now, very much that I've been playing with this. If I share something, then asking some sort of prompting question like, how does that land with you? Or what insights are there? Or what are your thoughts? So thanks, Abi, for that. And also what we've contracted for in the first place can be important too. What is it that people are wanting? And we are now going to explore the how. And we've got we do have some really nice comments in the chat. So for everyone, if we can go back, Abi, for a second. Can we So we've got some nice points in the chat as well. Something about the difference between coaching, supervision, mentoring as well. Getting agreements. So thank you for all your thoughts and comments. And so I'd like you to just think for a moment about, we're going to explore the how. And picture this. It's 40,000 years ago, give or take. Someone's just learned that if you eat those white berries, you die, but the red ones are safe. Now, that's crucial information. But how do you make sure the next generation doesn't have to learn it the hard way? You know, these are just berries. In those days, you couldn't print a warning label, so you had to do something else. And people would sit by a fire and say, right, here's something I've learned about berries. And suddenly the knowledge travels not through instruction, but through story. Okay, so we are going to look at the how of sharing knowledge through the age-old technique of stories. And if you fast forward to now, your client might be struggling with speaking up in meetings, for example, and you could launch into a mini lecture about assertiveness. Or instead, you might share a story, and you can share a story from a number of different perspectives. And we're going to share some perspectives, and then we are going to get the opportunity to play with this. And this is an activity, and it's adapted from Paul Jackson and Mark McCurgo's activity. So we're going to think about know-how and storytelling. And as you sit by the fire, as you share your wisdom, you can tell your story. This is your story and your experience. You could tell somebody else's story, his, her, or their story, a third-party story. You might share a metaphor or a legend, or you might share an expert story. Because in a moment, you're going to be in groups of around 5. One person will become the customer, and someone with a real challenge that they'd like help with will ask the group for their wisdom, and everyone else becomes a storyteller offering wisdom through one of these lenses. My story, his, her, their story, metaphor or legend, and expert story. And here's an example. I know we all know how to tell stories, but here's an example just to clarify the pieces. So for example, your customer or client might come up to you and say, I want to speak up more in meetings. And you might share your story, which you can read there, but I'll speak up. When I kept getting talked over, I started going in with one prepared sentence I could use to enter the conversation. For example, I'd like to build on that. It made speaking up feel less risky because I wasn't improvising from scratch. That was my story. Perhaps you tell somebody else's story. A client of mine wrote 3-line crib sheets before every meeting, a point, a question, and what she wanted from the meeting. Having those prompts meant she always had something ready to contribute. That's somebody else's story. And this is my personal favorite, the metaphor or legend. So a story not directly related, but can be useful. And in this instance, someone might say, it's like joining a queue in a shop. If you hover on the edge, people assume you're not in. Once you step in, everyone adjusts. A small move signals your intention. And if it's really wise, we can all nod and go, And then the expert story. This is where you assume expertise and you give some recommendation or some guidance. So from a communication perspective, the simplest technique is to speak early and briefly. I'd recommend contributing in the first 5 minutes, even if it's just a clarifying question. It resets how people see you. So 4 different ways in to share our expertise and wisdom from a different story. So in our groups, who does what? In a moment, you'll be put into groups of around 5. There's going to be a customer, and that's someone who wants some help, and that will be the person whose first name is closest to A in the alphabet. We're going alphabet. The storytellers are going to go in alphabetical order by first name, cycling through the 4 perspectives. So if your group is Alex, Brenda, Claire, and David, Alex is the customer. Brenda tells Brenda's story. Claire tells his, her, their story. David tells metaphor, legend, and so on. How it runs is in your groups, The customer very briefly explains what they want help with. I'd like help in speaking up with meetings. I'd like to know how to redecorate my house. Whatever it is that you want some advice, guidance, and collective wisdom from the group. The storytellers are going to take it in turn to share their stories. 1 minute, quite a punchy story, 60 to 90 seconds. And after one round, the customer reflects back what landed well, what was useful. We're going to have about 10 minutes in your groups. So if you get round one round, keep going. If you're exactly right in numbers, that's excellent. If you've got one more or one less, just adapt, run round twice, or pick up an extra perspective that you would like. People clear on that? A thumbs up or any questions? It's all in the chat for you as well. Any questions, or are we ready to go into breakout rooms? Okay, and if
I'll
anyone
open the rooms then.
going in a breakout room, that's great. But enjoy your conversations, and we look forward to hearing back from you and how your storytelling and wisdom sharing goes together. Enjoy your time together. And record. Welcome back. How was that? Lot of nods, yeah. Some nice. I had the privilege of jumping in and hearing a few moments and words of wisdom. Let's hear from the customers first. Let's hear from one or two of you about what was interesting or useful for you, or which perspectives landed. Who were our customers?
I'll go
Yeah.
first.
Go on, Deborah.
Yeah. So that was a question that Sabina actually asked me at the end, which ones was most relevant for me was stories. And I think it's the metaphors. The metaphor doesn't seem to have that advising, suggesting, I'm telling you what to do kind of thing. I think, but I think it also depends on the person, because I am quite visual and I love images and any kind of imagery. So when somebody would place a metaphor before me with images, it would probably resonate better with me. But at the same time, the stories that were being told is, I think, also the one where, or there were two that we kind of mixed up some things, but where there was a story about somebody else we know. And so it's very real, but it's still somebody else that we know happened and it was very successful. And that's so it's not necessarily talking about myself. There's somebody that I know that went through the same. So that sort of feels a little bit, if I can say, gentler for me than just this giving advice. But metaphors definitely for me work better. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And metaphors, as I said, a big fan. And if we're lucky, or if we're listening, the customer or the client will offer us a metaphor. So they might say something like, I'm taking a helicopter view. And then we have something that we can work with, or it's a journey for me, or and so the metaphors I love are the ones that emerge and that we can potentially co-create as well. And this perspective, somebody else's story, because there's some distance from it. It's offered like a gift, perhaps. Cornell.
It was an interesting observation we had with Alex, communication father-daughter. And is there a risk or a benefit of telling your as a my story that you get more empathy. And so is it good to have a distance or not a distance, in a way that somebody is listening to you, you are telling your story, and he is kind of also able to cry with you and being involved in this story. So that was a very interesting observation of the my story, their story version.
Ah, so if we tell our story, being aware of what we're bringing into the conversation. Any other?
But the who is listening to getting empathizing with you as a person as well. So you are telling your story as an advice, and the person who is listening to is being emotionally involved. And if it is a hard emotion, then I don't know what, but there's more than just having a Chinese wall of giving advice or not.
And we can decide if that is useful, relevant, or appropriate in the context. Thank you very much for that. What else? Other reflections from our customers or beyond? Which perspectives landed? What other insights did you gain?
Go on, Chris, come in.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, so I was a customer. My overall kind of experience was that I didn't find any of the forms of advice useful in themselves, not directly. But what happened is that my internal response to being advised was useful. So it's kind of useful in a paradoxical way. Basically what happened was, so I did a thing which I kind of, I have like a hunch, I think this happens in therapy and coaching quite a lot. Is that kind of like my response is, well, okay, none of these people can really help me, so I'm going to have to work this out myself. Which is kind of what I did. And I found myself kind of like reflecting on what I found has been useful recently and kind of what experience I've had in the past that I can apply to this. And my brain was doing that. And I came up with some useful advice for myself, tailored to myself, like in response to being advised. So it's a weird thing. So it was kind of indirectly helpful. The interaction was helpful. The advice itself, the advice giving, was not directly useful.
Yeah, I love that. So if we choose to give advice, we're giving it unhelpfully so that people can realize that they are giving themselves better advice. Really nice. Thanks, Chris.
I was a customer as well. And I would just like to add to what was said before about, I also found the metaphors easiest to connect with, and I agree with that. A form of distancing does seem to help a little bit. But I also think it was really interesting what Chris was saying there, because I had this experience in a coaching call of my own. But the way that my client framed it was a little bit like, I liked your advice and it kind of helped me expand on that. And he was saying that if you hadn't given that, I wouldn't have arrived at this point either. But I still think that it's a great point that Chris is making, that like the advice itself, it may not actually be very helpful. But yeah, so I guess it's a bit complex like that. It's interesting to go through the process. So thank you.
It may not be helpful, and yet it still may serve a purpose. Abi, any thoughts from you before we close up our session today?
Maybe just one, and that's that if lots of you have come away from this with a general feeling that of those types of sharing know-how, metaphor felt the most powerful or the easiest to kind of hold at a distance, then we have a lot to learn from our clean language colleagues. I think clean language and solution focus are very compatible approaches. And this isn't a session on clean, and I'm not going to attempt to describe it, but it's worth going away and having a look at it, because it's a way of working with metaphor which really works with what your clients bring in your clients' language, and trying to keep their kind of, I suppose, language created space very much theirs, and you're asking questions using their words to build on it in the way that we do with solution focused, but with a particular view to building metaphor. So if you loved that part of it, I would go off and have a look at some stuff around clean language, because I think it will support your SF practice.
And
so my last.
Yeah. And Paul's nice piece there, that people sometimes thank me for my advice that I've carefully not given. And so there is that element in coaching sessions where people come back and say, I did exactly what you told me to, even though we haven't. So thanks for that too. And thank you, Alex, for your reflections as well. So bringing our time together has sadly come to an end. But thank you very much for being part of today's conversation, for exploring this. What we are seeing is a complex, intriguing, and interactive approach. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, your opinions, and your stories. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference as well. It's lovely to see you. So thank you very much for joining us. And if you would like to share takeaways as you leave and comments, that is wonderful too. Okay, bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
I'm just going to hang on 2 seconds, Ginny.
Yeah.
Just to say, I hope you're not underwater.
No, the
You're
weather's
in
been
the
fine.
Kinter.
Yeah.
Yeah? Cool. Good. Big storm.